Off the coast of Nova Scotia, an island has swallowed more than 350 ships over 4 centuries, and the wrecks are still there, buried under shifting sand. And in the mountains of Alberta, a mountain collapsed in 90 seconds, and more than 70 people are still entombed beneath 82 million tons of limestone, and no one has ever retrieved a single body. Today, we are exploring Don't Visit. These 12 Canadian places alone. Locals won't go there either. So stay tuned till the end, because number 1 will blow your mind. Number 12, Oak Island, Nova Scotia. Off the south shore of Nova Scotia, in Mahone Bay on Mi'kmaq territory, a small island has consumed over 200 years of human ambition, millions of dollars, and at least 6 human lives. In 1795, a teenager named Daniel McGinnis noticed a circular depression in the earth on the island's surface. He and 2 friends began digging and found layers of oak logs placed at precise 10-foot intervals going down. Something large and deliberate had been buried far below. No one has ever reached it. What searchers found instead were engineered flood tunnels that fill any excavation shaft with seawater before it can reach bottom. The death toll climbed with each new expedition. An old legend warns the treasure will not surface until 7 men have died searching for it. 6 have. Today, a television series documents the ongoing excavation. After more than 2 centuries of effort, no verified treasure has been recovered. The island accepts everything brought to it. It has returned nothing. Number 11, Cannington Manor, Saskatchewan. About 200 kilometers southeast of Regina, near the village of Manor, a set of limestone ruins sits in an open prairie field. The wind does not stop. In 1882, an English gentleman named Captain Edward Pierce placed advertisements in British newspapers, offering upper-class young men the chance to farm the Canadian prairies, while maintaining a civilized way of life. They came. They brought foxhounds, cricket equipment, dinner jackets, and a determination to recreate Edwardian England on the Saskatchewan plains. At its height, Cannington Manor had over 200 residents, a flour mill, a creamery, regular horse races, and lawn tennis matches held between men in white. It was a genuinely strange and genuinely sincere attempt. In 1900, the Canadian Pacific Railway laid its tracks 11 kilometers south of the colony, bypassing it entirely. Within 3 years, Cannington Manor was abandoned. Residents dismantled what they could carry and left. The stone church ruins remain as a provincial historic site. Standing inside them, surrounded by empty fields in every direction, you understand both why they came and why they could not stay. Number 10, Tranquille Sanatorium, Kamloops, British Columbia. On the western shore of Kamloops Lake, 15 kilometers from the city, on Sequipmc territory, a cluster of red brick buildings overlooks the water. Beautiful from a distance. Harder to look at once you know what happened inside. Tranquille Sanatorium opened in 1907 as a tuberculosis facility. Tuberculosis in the early 20th century had no cure. Patients came to breathe dry interior air, to rest, and very often to die. At its peak, the sanatorium held more than 400 patients at a time. Thousands died here across its operating years. In 1958, the facility converted into a residential institution for people with developmental disabilities. It closed in 1983 after years of documented abuse and institutional neglect. Today, the property operates as a farm and event venue. Some original buildings have been stabilized. Others are slowly collapsing. The graveyards are still there, and the full count of who is buried in them and where remains incomplete. The lake reflects everything. The buildings hold their silence. Number 9, Frank Slide, Alberta. At 4:10 in the morning on April 29th, 1903, Turtle Mountain collapsed. 90 seconds. That is how long it took for 82 million tons of limestone to break from the peak and bury the eastern end of the mining town of Frank in the Crow's Nest Pass, about 175 kilometers south of Calgary. At least 70 people were killed, possibly 90. No one knows the exact number because no one knows how many miners were underground when it happened. The Niitsitapi, the Blackfoot Confederacy, had long called Turtle Mountain the mountain that moves. Geologists have since confirmed it had been sliding incrementally for centuries. The coal mine dug under its base in 1901 accelerated the process considerably. The bodies were never recovered. They remain today beneath 30 meters of broken rock across a debris field that stretches across the valley floor. The Frank Slide Interpretive Center tells the full story. You can walk out across the rock slide itself, a pale gray landscape of enormous, shattered limestone, and look back up at the open face of the mountain above you. The mountain has not stopped moving. Geologists monitor it continuously. Number 8. Lac Mégantic, Quebec. At 1:15 in the morning on July 6, 2013, a Montreal, Maine, and Atlantic Railway train carrying 72 tanker cars of Bakken crude oil rolled unattended down a grade and derailed in the center of Lac Mégantic, a town of roughly 6,000 people in eastern Quebec, about 250 kilometers east of Montreal. The engineer had left the train idling on the main line the previous night. A fire broke out in the locomotive. Firefighters responded and, following standard protocol, shut down the engine. They did not know that the engine had been the only thing holding the air brakes engaged. The moment it shut down, 72 cars of crude oil began rolling toward town. The train reached 100 kilometers per hour before it hit downtown. The derailment and explosions killed 47 people. 30 buildings were destroyed. The Moussi Café, packed with people on a Saturday night in July, sat at the center of the blast. The company declared bankruptcy. No senior executive served a prison sentence. Downtown Lac Mégantic has been rebuilt. The street where the Moussi Café stood is now a memorial park, with the names of the dead cut into stone. People leave flowers. I hope you are enjoying this video so far. So why not give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who loves Canadian history? It would mean a lot. Now, let us continue with our countdown. Number 7, Cypress Hills, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. The Cypress Hills rise from the southern plains like an island above the surrounding prairie, straddling the border of Saskatchewan and Alberta, about 570 kilometers southwest of Regina. They are beautiful hills. They are also the location of one of the most unpunished acts of mass violence in the history of the Canadian West. On May 1st, 1873, a group of American whiskey traders and wolf hunters rode into a camp of Assiniboine, Nakota, people near a trading post operated by Abel Farwell. A dispute over horses had been building. What followed was a massacre. Between 20 and 30 Nakota people were killed, including women. Bodies were mutilated. The attackers returned across the border to the United States. No one was ever convicted. The massacre was the direct catalyst for the formation of the Northwest Mounted Police, today the RCMP. It was the violence that finally forced Ottawa to act on the lawlessness of the Western Territories. Today, Cypress Hills Interprovincial Park offers hiking and camping. The massacre site carries no dedicated monument. The Nakota have received no formal apology. The hills are beautiful in every season. The silence in them, once you know, is a particular kind of silence. Number 6, Moose Jaw Tunnels, Saskatchewan. Beneath the oldest block of downtown Moose Jaw, about 75 kilometers west of Regina, a network of tunnels runs below the city streets. What took place in those tunnels is still debated. What drove people underground is documented history. After Chinese laborers built the Canadian Pacific Railway across Canada, the federal government introduced the Chinese head tax, $50 in 1885, raised to $500 in 1903, equal to roughly 2 years of wages for a laborer. The explicit purpose was to make Chinese immigration economically impossible. The Chinese Immigration Act of 1923 banned it entirely. In Moose Jaw, accounts have long held that Chinese workers, unable to pay the tax, concealed themselves in tunnels beneath the city's buildings, living underground for years to avoid deportation. The tunnels exist. The persecution that created the conditions for hiding is fully documented in Canadian federal law. Today, the tunnels of Moose Jaw operates as a guided tour experience. The story told inside those tunnels is true, and it belongs to the history of this country, whether Canada acknowledges it comfortably or not. Number 5, Cheslata Lake, British Columbia. About 100 kilometers west of Burns Lake in northern British Columbia, the Cheslata-Tien, the Cheslata Carrier Nation, had lived beside Cheslata Lake for thousands of years. In April 1952, they received notice to leave. The Alcan Aluminium Company was building the Kenny Dam, the rising Nechako Reservoir would flood the valley. In some cases, the Cheslata received fewer than 10 days to vacate their homes, their community, and their dead. They did not have time to move the graves. The water rose. The St. Joseph Mission Cemetery was submerged. Coffins broke open. Human remains washed into the river system and were carried downstream. The provincial government denied for years that this had happened at all. The Cheslata have fought for recognition and restitution for over 7 decades. Some land has been returned. The graves are still at the bottom of the lake. Standing at the water's edge today, looking across a surface that appears completely still, it is difficult to hold in your mind what is directly beneath you. Number 4. Grassy Narrows, Ontario. Beginning in 1962, the Dryden Chemical Company discharged mercury-contaminated wastewater into the English Wabigoon River system in northwestern Ontario, about 100 kilometers north of Kenora. The Asubpi-Skosi-Wagung Anishinaabe Grassy Narrows, First Nation, depend on that river entirely. They fish from it, drink from it, and have built their way of life around it for generations. By the late 1960s, the damage was visible in the bodies of the people who lived there. Residents were losing motor control. Children were born with neurological damage. The symptoms were clinically identical to Minamata disease, the devastating mercury poisoning documented in Japan in the 1950s from the same type of industrial discharge. The provincial and federal governments were informed. The discharge continued until 1970. Meaningful intervention was delayed for decades. Fish advisories on the English Wabigoon River remain in effect today. People in Grassy Narrows are still sick. Ontario committed $85 million in 2017 for a mercury care home and remediation work. That work is ongoing. The river still runs through town the same as it always has. The people who live beside it know what runs with it. Number 3. Wreck House, Newfoundland. On the southwestern coast of Newfoundland, along Route 470, near Port aux Basques, the Long-Range Mountains create a gap in the landscape that channels air from the Gulf of St. Lawrence, with a force that has no equivalent anywhere in settled Canada. Wind speeds at Wreck House have been recorded above 200 kilometers per hour. Transport trucks have been rolled off the highway. Canadian National Railway cars have been blown completely off the tracks on multiple documented occasions. For decades, CN employed a local farmer named Lochy McDougall as an informal wind warning system. McDougall had lived with these winds his entire life and developed an understanding of them that no instrument of the era could replicate. When he said, "Do not run the train," they did not run the train. His judgment was that reliable. McDougall died in 1965. CN installed electronic monitoring equipment to replace what he had known by feel and by instinct. There are still days when the equipment cannot fully account for what is coming. Number 2. Sable Island, Nova Scotia. 300 kilometers off the coast of Nova Scotia in the open North Atlantic, a thin crescent of sand barely holds itself above the surface of the ocean. Sable Island is 42 kilometers long and less than 2 kilometers wide at its broadest point. It does not hold still. Currents, tides, and storms push it slowly eastward and reshape it every year. The Mi'kmaq knew it as Menegoisanuk. For 4 centuries of European navigation, sailors called it the graveyard of the Atlantic. More than 350 ships are on record as having wrecked here. The true number is certainly higher. The island does not destroy ships against rocks. Its sand is deep and soft. Ships run aground and sink into it, and the island slowly closes over them. Some wrecks surface briefly at low tide, before disappearing again into the sand. The most famous survivors of the island's long history are its horses. Roughly 500 wild ponies, descended from Acadian animals, seized during the 1755 deportation, now running free for over 250 years. Sable Island is a national park reserve. A Transport Canada permit is required to set foot on it. The island accepts almost no visitors. Standing on its beach, between the open Atlantic on one side and the graveyard beneath your feet on the other, the scale of what this stretch of sand has taken becomes very clear. Number 1. Kamloops Indian Residential School, British Columbia. On the outskirts of Kamloops, On the traditional territory of Tk'emlúps te Secwépemc stands a large three-story building that operated as Canada's largest Indian residential school for 88 years. The Kamloops Indian Residential School opened in 1890, run by the Oblates of Mary Immaculate, under direct federal government funding and policy. At its peak, the school held more than 500 children. These were children who had been removed from their families by law, transported far from their home communities, forbidden from speaking their languages, and prohibited from practicing their cultures. The stated objective of the federal residential school system, stated explicitly in government documents, was to sever Indigenous children from their identities permanently. On May 27, 2021, Tk'emlúps te Secwépemc Chief Roseanne Casimir announced that ground-penetrating radar had identified the remains of 215 children in unmarked graves on the school's grounds. Some of the children were as young as 3 years old. Their families had never been told they had died. None of this was a surprise to residential school survivors. For decades, Indigenous communities across Canada had been saying exactly what had happened inside these schools. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 2015 final report documented at least 3,200 confirmed deaths of children across the full residential school system nationwide. The actual number is believed to be far higher. The Commission described the system as cultural genocide. More than 150,000 Indigenous children were forced to attend residential schools across Canada between the 1870s and 1996, when the last school closed. The Canadian government issued a formal apology in 2008. Pope Francis issued an apology on Canadian soil in July 2022. Both apologies were received. Neither has fully answered for what was done. Today, the Kamloops school grounds are cared for and protected by Tk'emlúps te Secwépemc. The site is approached with reverence by those who come. It is a burial ground. It is also one of the most important places in this country for understanding what Canada has done and what it still owes. You do not visit it for the experience. You visit it to be accountable to what is there. I hope you have enjoyed this video, so make sure to share it with your friends, and see you in the next video. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more journeys through Canada's hidden and forgotten places.